Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. Now I'm here at the grave of the most visited grave of any Irishman who's buried outside of Ireland. So this is the tomb of Oscar Wilde you can see behind me. And this is bizarre figure of this angel with the enormous wings. I'm in Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris. So Oscar Wilde, he's born in October 1854 at Westland Row in Dublin. And his father was a very well-to-do surgeon, indeed was the royal physician in Ireland, so any member of the royal family who came to Ireland would be looked after by him. He'd come from somewhere in the west, like County Roscommon, son of a doctor himself. So the Wilde family, they were communicants of the Church of Ireland. Oscar had a brother William, he had one sister who died very young. And his mother, Speranza, she was the daughter of a successful Wexford solicitor. His father was knighted Sir William Wilde, and his mother, she wrote under the pen name Speranza, as in hope in Italian. So she was attracted to romantic nationalism and indeed revolution. I think she cooled on that. She didn't do anything besides actually just publishing work. So it's a very bookish home. His father was a fascinating character in his own right, a real polymath, fascinated by ornithology, paleontology, various other subjects. So Oscar Wilde grew up in a very intellectual milieu. He went to Portora Royal School, that's in Enniskillen, so now in Northern Ireland. So he was very tall, quite strong, but not particularly sporty, but an extremely gifted schoolboy, well, academically gifted. He then went up to Trinity College, Dublin, at the age of 17. So that was the foremost university in Ireland. You've got to remember that very, very few people went on to third level education back then. Most people were leaving school at the age of 12. When he was born, we didn't even have compulsory schooling in the British Isles. So some children didn't go to school at all. His father was also a philanderer, had several children by his mistresses. As it was quipped, his father, who was so successful, so rich as a surgeon, won a fortune with his knife and lost it with his fork being as in his crotch, having to pay maintenance for all his natural children. Wilde was reading many classics at Trinity, and he went up there the same year that the Home Rule Association was formed, but he never seems to have cared much about politics. He was a contemporary of Edward Henry Carson and some other people who were going to become prominent in early 20th century Irish politics. He really made a name for himself at Trinity. He graduated, and what to do but take another degree. So he won a demyship to Magdalen College, Oxford. Demyship is one down from a scholarship. He'd got a medal for Greek, I think the Berkeley Medal for Greek at Trinity. Berkeley, that 17th century bishop of, Ross, as in Ross Carbery in County Cork, who was a notable philosopher. So then he went to Magdalen, I know it's spelled Magdalen, part of Oxford University, where he read Literae Humaniores, as in Latin and ancient Greek. So he had a very happy few years there. He won the Newdigate Prize for English poetry. I have to point out it's in English because, of course, people were still composing poems in Latin and ancient Greek quite a bit in those days. I don't think he ever joined the Union, though, but he was a very flamboyant character. He loved to make a splash. He had an acid pen when he needed to. He was incredibly witty. So what to do when he graduated? I mean, 2 degrees was really more than enough. Almost nobody did postgraduate degrees. Substantive doctorates didn't even exist in the British Isles back then. One of the obvious things to do was to become a don, as in a lecturer at Oxford University, Cambridge, or indeed Trinity. But at that stage, that was only open to clergymen. You had to be ordained in the Church of Ireland or the Church of England, and that rule just changed after he graduated. So even though they didn't actually have to be clergy by the 1880s, and most of them were, and still the ambiance was very proper. And he was too controversial, too much of a colourful figure to be accepted by them. So what was he going to do? He didn't want to teach at a school. The bar might have been an obvious thing, but he decided no, that was too fussy. Anyway, he went down to London and set himself up as a professor of aesthetics, as he called it. His father had died, so they didn't have as much money as before. I'm not quite sure how he financed this, having his tea parties, and he really cut a dash with his incredibly striking dress sense, growing his hair down to his shoulders. Indeed, there's a play called Patience by Gilbert and Sullivan, which is really a send-up of poseurs like Oscar Wilde. It's not solely him as a composite of others. And when they toured the United States, he came with them so that Americans would have a better idea what they were talking about. And anyway, so many people have been leaving tributes on this tomb, were kissing it with lipstick and so on. They've had to put this up. They put up a number of warnings, pleading people not to do that kind of thing, not to mark it, not to write any inscription. They had to renovate in 1992 as well. So perhaps shouldn't tell the whole story of Oscar Wilde's life. He later married Constance Lloyd, the daughter of a barrister. They had 2 children. All was going well. His plays were incredibly successful, and he was making lots of money. Had a house on Tite Street in Chelsea, London. That's a garden flat, just a 2-bedroom flat. I think they must have had somewhere else a bit more spacious. So he was really just lionized by London high society. Anyway, he wrote he wrote The Selfish Giant, a few stories. Did he? Yes, a picture of Dorian Gray. The picture of Dorian Gray, his only novel, based in a lot of real locale in London, like Grosvenor Square. It mentions about this statue, well, not such statue, rather painting of Dorian Gray, this very talented young man, which turns hideous when he has been known for his bonsai good looks, because it reflects his inner character. He's actually wicked and deceitful. Anyway, I won't spoil the rest of it for you. Was it in any way a self-portrait? I mean, he obviously had to be discreet about his homosexuality. Not that we regard that as a bad thing now, but it was considered to be a terribly bad thing back then. Until 1861, the most detestable crime of buggery was punishable by death in the United Kingdom, and they meant it. As recent as the 1830s, 2 men were hanged for sodomy, and the evidence against them was actually quite flimsy. That was the most recent execution for homosexual acts in the British Isles. But back to Wilde. Then he fatefully met Bocce, or Lord Alfred Douglas to give him his proper name. Bocce, or as it should be pronounced Bowsey, I'm not quite sure. In the film, Wilde is pronounced Bocce. Anyway, he was the son of the Marquis of Queensberry. Marquis of Queensberry, a very prominent nobleman who indeed drew up the rules of boxing, the Marquis of Queensberry rules. So at this stage, Oscar Wilde was 38, Bocce was 21. Bocce was still an undergraduate at Magdalen, as in Oscar's old college, and he'd previously been at Winchester College, one of the most estimable schools in the United Kingdom. So they began their relationship. He was still married to Constance. Did she know about this? I'm not sure. He'd previously been feasting with panthers, as in having liaisons with working class youths. So as Bocce was 21 when their relationship started, there's no suggestion that he was a minor, certainly not by our standards, but homosexual acts between people of any age were illegal. But if it was a man over 21 with a man under 21, the older party would be severely punished. The young party would also be punished, but less severely, on the basis that the older man had led him into this unnatural lust. Anyway, so then Wilde was having his relationship with him. Lord Queensberry got to hear about it. He was not best pleased. He was a very irascible type, a very tyrannical father. So he went to Oscar Wilde's club. Forgive me, I can't remember which his club was in London, and he left a note pinned to the notice board saying, "For Oscar Wilde, posing as a Sondermite." Yes, he misspelt it. Was that deliberate? I'm unsure. So Oscar Wilde sued for criminal libel.